Travis Wayne Goodsell, second Saturday session conference review. So I have to keep repeating because there's so many new people that keep coming. YouTube finally allowed them to see the video that I've got multi-thousands of over the years. Book of Mormon, 1 Nephi chapter 1, verse 2. Learning of the Jews, which means the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is not Joseph's church. The Book of Mormon is not theirs. They stole it, and they replaced it with Christianity and Jesus. And so Joseph Smith, by calling it abominable, in verse 19 of the 1838 history, canonized, allows us to see how abominable these prophets, so-called self-proclaimed, with just the title, they have no fruit for us to judge them by, other than they have no fruit by which we now judge them by. They are frauds. You have to produce fruit, and the fruit has to be good. They've got no fruit, therefore they're not good. They're corrupt to the core with a fake spiritual seed. And so, yeah, it's sad that 2 more days, and it's the end of the latter days, according to the prophecy and revelation of all Jewish scriptures of the whole Bible. Bible is not Christian. Christians replaced it, just as Brigham Young replaced Joseph Smith. So, let me share with you another deeper meaning. If you remember the first session, Sister Dennis or Denise, whatever it's pronounced, Zoramites. This is the learning of the Jews. They built a synagogue. That's Jewish. They separated from Zarahemla. Jewish. They now replaced the Jews, as they call themselves the chosen ones. Just like Christians replaced the Jews, calling them the chosen covenant people. Likewise, the church. We are the chosen covenant people. All else who branched off from Joseph Smith are apostate, anti-Mormon, antichrist goers. And these Zoramites created a Ramiantum by which they spouted their blasphemies and abominations, of which Alma and Amulek were horrified with, how they could stray so far from the truth by replacing the Jews, having forgotten the Jews that gave them the synagogue where the scriptures were read from. And now their God was now a spirit entity. That's for you, Child of Faith. Little addition from when I also did the Ammon video for you in the learning of the Jews. Yeah, the Great Spirit, that's the Christian Trinitarian Jesus. Spirit. Because there's no other way to describe it. It's not real. And so in the Book of Mormon, they just refer to it as a spirit deity. Because you'll never see him. He'll never appear. He's not real. And thus people get deceived into worshiping him. And so yes, the Lamanites are those who are Christian, who are Brighamites. The Zoramites are Brighamites, having left and abandoned the core of the religion. And so, yeah, every conference discussed me. That There are Mormons who are easily deceived, either because they know the truth and have no integrity, previous conference, previous session, or are illiterate and are easily fooled. And so the song right before the conference started, I Feel My Savior's Love, with Evie Claire as the singer. Beautiful singing voice. Beautiful girl, beautiful little kids paraded in front of the screen of the music video. All the little kids are bearing testimony of the unseen Jesus. They aren't old enough to have testimonies. And here they are saying, I'm going to thank him one day when I see him. You're never going to see him, kids. There's a woman who left the church who does YouTube videos and is very popular because she has better sound quality than I do. And she's better looking. Who talked about a video that she did at BYU for returned missionaries. And she's looking back at that video and she's seeing how suckered she was as a Mormon. And she sort of laughs, but she's not separated from it enough yet to fully laugh. She's still in the dismayed stage of, how could I have been so deceived? But it's sick and wrong to use little children like that. That's exactly the same tactic that Islam is doing to the Gazan children to turn the world against Israel. Those kids should have been removed immediately after October 7th. The parents chose not to leave to save their children. The parents are responsible for those children suffering right now, even though the parents are dead. The parents are to blame, not Israel. Those who come in to give aid in the war zone are responsible for their own actions, not Israel. Whether it be food, whether it be medical. You know the dangers. You need to take responsibility for your actions and accept the consequences. Do not pass the blame onto those who are not responsible. So as beautiful as that song was sung, it is abominable. Nelson showed for the second session. But at the end, they would not show him and the first presidency leaving the building. The camera panned the leadership on the stands. And then once the presidency was gone, then they showed Cook and one other who was also leaving at that moment down to the tunnel. That was very interestingly curious. Why wouldn't they show them? Every single other conference and session always showed the first presidency leaving, and then the camera would cut to the conference center and then do their little closing thing. Not this time. Another first. And if you missed the previous session, Oakes announced that the members of the 12, for the first time ever, would be conducting, because the first presidency are too old and infirm to conduct. They're on their deathbed. And so, something that you need to know, if there are only 6 apostles left out of all 15. They do not have a majority to form a quorum to lay their hands on the next president of the church. And so 9, if they die, the church is over. It can only be led by the 6 remaining apostles, who can't really add more because they've made it so that the president of the church calls in new ones. And so when they die off, it would be the 70 presidency and the 70, general 70, who would lead the church. Just, something that you need to know. Section 107 is where we get this from. But that wasn't Joseph Smith's way. This was an alteration from Brigham Young's alteration. They sabotaged themselves with the need to affirm that the president of the 12 has to become the president of the church, even though Brigham Young does not have authority to be the president of the church. They don't even have the right keys of Moses. And so the temple keys, or the temple keys of Elijah, they don't have them. They don't have the Moses keys, Elijah keys, Jehovah keys, or Elishua keys. Notice I made the change. I know what I'm talking about. You do not want to argue with somebody who deciphered Paleo-Hebrew and is an expert in the field. It comes from Abraham, the gospel of salvation, thus the God of salvation, Elishua. So Bednar is demonstrating that he deceived journalists about temples and makes a new definition for being still. It's for people who are panicking about deity. That's why the scripture says, "Be still and know that I am God." It says, calm down, relax. Don't do it when you want to get to it. Maybe make that the theme song. Gotta hurry up here, we don't want to go too long. And so, with his new definition, he then created a whole talk based on his definition. Thus a circular reasoning fallacy, fulfilling each other. I've seen that way too many times in conferences over the decades. And so when somebody says, that's an excellent question, they're hesitating to create an answer. And it means, I'm about to lie to you. And so when the journalist asked him the question, and he said, that's an excellent question, it means, I'm about to lie to you. Dear God, I see it all the time in politics. You never knew me. I was trying to find it. It's supposedly there in Matthew chapter 7, verse 33. But I checked. I was right there, and I didn't see it. That was weird. And so I looked it up during the other conference to see if I could find it. And that's where I found the reference. But 33. There is no 33? What is going on? Which means it's a Joseph Smith translation. What is going on? Oh, this is hilarious. 11, 17, it ends. Google search led me astray. Oh my hell. Because I couldn't use this because I'm watching the conference and I can't, the malware attack by my own security service deleted the ROM program that I gotta pull out and re-upload. I guess it's over there. Oh dear God. So anyway, whatever. Ben then talked about his new definition of be still to be silent, and talked about it in the sense of hypnotizing people with silence in order to brainwash. This is a reverse conversion therapy where you use silence to slip in incorrect miseducation, misinformation stuff. Whereas conversion therapy is a torture technique, shock therapy, showing violence on a movie screen and guys raping and being abused, and so that the person can be horrified and thus be converted from whatever they immorally straight ways they were. You know, the Clockwork Orange, for example, is where the movie comes from, but the church used it on those who were gay and got caught by the church and thus tortured in their concentration camps. So yeah, that's part of what the children were doing with the song. Songs in the church are meant to be monotone for the most part with the hymns, that they're not supposed to arouse your spirit like Baptists do with their hymns. The Baptists are all over the floor with the excitement of the Spirit of Jesus. Not in this church. They will not allow it. And that's a method of reverse conversion therapy through conformity and compliance, through calmness and silence, which don't panic. That's what they think of the Southern Baptists, that they're panicking and having a hissy fit, and thus need to be calmed down. It's an abusive thing. And so when he talks about Jesus as the only begotten of the Father, I need to do another Jewishness for you. It means that there is only one assigned to fulfill all the prophecies of all the Jewish prophets in all the Jewish scriptures. When you remove Christian goggles from your eyes, there's 100 times, if not more, prophecies and revelations that are involved. But you can't see it because of the Christianity. The Zoramite example I gave you. All you could see is that it's literal history, that was what happened, and you have no higher level, deeper meaning from that. But when you put the learning of the Jews in there, oh wow, Christians replace the Jews, supersessionism. Oh wow, the Book of Mormon is condemning Christianity as the great and abominable church. And we're in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Huh. So it wasn't Joseph Smith who changed it in 1838. It was Brigham who cooed the church. And so, yeah, it also was disturbing when he talks about having faith in Jesus during storms, having your foundation on Jesus. Jesus isn't real. He does not exist. You are being told to build your foundation on Jesus when he does not exist. Just like Christians. Joseph Smith calls that abominable because the consequences of doing that is faith crisis, or destruction in your life with no Jesus to save you. And that's why in the previous one, the first and last talks by the apostles were lying to you about having the keys of authority for the temple. Section 85 of the Doctrine and Covenants makes it very clear that in the latter days, the man, or this is called the one mighty and strong, 103:16 is the man like Moses, the same guy, learning of the Jews. There's only one to be this guy, and he's going to be Mormon. So says Joseph Smith. And so Bednar also does not understand the concept of Sabbath as he's leading you astray. He refers to the Sabbath as a sacred time, but calls the sacred time of the Sabbath Sunday. Anybody who knows the history of the change from Saturday to Sunday with Constantine knows that Bednar lied to you. But he lied to you even more than that, as no, the church will never tell you, and Christianity will never tell you, and even the Jews don't know. Saturday, as the Sabbath day of rest, doing no work, came from the creation of Babylon. They created a 7-day week calendar. They were superstitious about the number 7, so the king designated the 7th day of the week that nobody work on it because he didn't want his people to be cursed and punished by the gods. And thus began the Sabbath, because in Hebrew, 7 and Sabbath are similar. So when Jesus of the Jewish author says that Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath, he's taking the Babylonian cultural calendar tradition and turning it to the learning of the Jews. Because the Hebrew script, Paleo-Hebrew script, is prophetic and revelatory. There is meaning. I've done that video. We won't go over it. So understand that the so-called prophet, seer, and revelator, not translator, got the information wrong. And so then a 70 talked about a blind man who called Jesus the son of David. And that's another Jewish thing of the scriptures. It's a pattern you're supposed to catch on to. Isaac was blind, Samson was blind, there's spiritual blindness talked about. Yeah, when you see somebody talking about blindness, they're talking about sun shall be darkened, even moon turned to blood. Sun shall be darkened, moon turned to blood. This is an Egyptianism. Remember 1 Nephi chapter 1 verse 2? It's not just learning of the Jews. What language is it? Yep, it's the pre-Babylonian captivity Israelites who were Egyptian. And so I've noticed over the decades 70s contradicting other speakers in the exact same session or of previous sessions, and even themselves within the same talk, because they do not know the subject matter. This is where Beam in the Moat comes in. They're telling Mormons how to be and believe and think and feel. And in so doing, they are accusing Mormons of being stupid and thus telling them what to do. And in so doing, they contradict themselves, exposing that they themselves are guilty of what they're accusing Mormons of falsely, which may actually be correct, but nonetheless, you can't assume all are guilty. That's where the error comes in. It's false. And so they themselves are guilty of what they're talking about. Brett Nielsen says he's a lawyer, talking about having witnesses giving testimony about what they saw and what they heard. And here we go with the beam and the mote, as he completely botches it, talking about a spiritual witness instead, about Jesus. And he even closes, I am a witness that Jesus lives. You lie, counselor. He would get disbarred and lose his license for doing that kind of a stunt in the courtroom. He knows this, and yet he did it over the pulpit of conference. And he pulled an ad populum argument in the main body of his talk, in which he was talking about all the Mormons who are joining the church all over the world, as he is a witness, as he's seen and heard. Yeah, and that there's no better time to be a Mormon. Why? Because people are joining the church? What if people aren't joining the church? Is it not a good time to be a Mormon? Ad populum fallacy. You should have known that, counselor. Another 70 said, take my joke upon you. Because of Spanish, the Y becomes a J, even though J's become an H. And so Nelson, if you remember Nelson, or my videos about Nelson, exposing and exploiting Nelson's ignorance of where he added a new doctrine, we are now supposed to yoke ourselves to Jesus. Well, now we joke ourselves to Jesus. That was cute. Yep, accents, so much fun. Gong, he talked about the 6th. He's the only one so far to have done that. We've got one more session left. But he talked about the formation of the church and Jesus' resurrection. No. I just did the video the other week showing you from the Hebrew calendar, which on Google forbid going to that site on Easter. The Jewish calendar forbidden by Google. Such an abomination. But nonetheless, you go to that site, type in 33 for the Roman year, or our year, and it will show you when Passover was, and it's nowhere near the 6th. Sort of, I think, wait a minute, we might, because I know it was for the 1st, for his birth, but I think maybe the 33rd might be close to similar, but the timing is off. And change to 33. Fetch Roman year. Yeah. April. Yeah, it's the 3rd day, and that's interesting because Joseph Smith, on the 3rd of April, which was the 3rd day of Passover, just as this is the 3rd day of Passover, had his Kirtland Temple vision of those guys I listed earlier. Joseph Smith was using this. So yes, it was during Passover, but it was the 3rd day. So that's confusing, because the 3rd day, list of events during Passion Week. The Holy Week timeline chart. Day 1, day 2, day 3. Tuesday, Jesus goes to the Mount of Olives, where he doesn't bleed here yet. The prophecy about the destruction of Jerusalem and the end of the age. Now do you see what Joseph was doing? Now do you see? Got to pay attention. Christians are wrong. Turn it into Jewish. And bada book, bada bing. There you go. Now you see what Joseph Smith was doing. And Gong made the blasphemous heresy blaming Jesus for consequences. About the car crash, all you can do is say, God giveth and the Lord taketh away. No, consequences. Somebody hit them in their car and they died. The person who hit them is responsible. Now, if it was a deer and they were swerving to hit the deer, there's a man here in Utah saving his kids in the back seat from a deer that was in the road. He had to swerve and died trying to not hit the deer and yet at the same time save his kids. Well, he died. You know, that is an accident, but the deer is responsible. You need to hunt down the deer and have it for dinner. Makes great jerky too. And so yeah, this concept of Jesus as not real and blaming Jesus for everything is just abominable. It needs to stop. You got to understand the physical realm. And there are always a causation. Do not let psychology with religion fool you. There is always a causation. And so then Cook, yeah, he claims that he was there at the actual building where Jesus washed the feet of the apostles right before his death. How abominable. That's exactly what Constantine did. Went on a tour, and I think it was maybe a mother who also, well, she did it after Constantine had already designated the spots after the creation of Christianity, turning the Jewish scriptures into literal history. So then he went on a tour and said, this is the spot where I designated as literal history. His mother likewise went on the tour. This is where my son said that Jesus was born. Dear God, just abominable. So be still and know that you're Jewish. And have integrity to stand up for Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon as Jewish.